Good evening. I'd like to call this Thursday, March 20th, 2025 meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Tonight will be following the published and posted agenda. Will be recorded live and for future viewing on Chelmsford TV, also available on their website and through YouTube. We will also be broadcasting through Zoom, although we ask that if you are attending by Zoom, if you don't plan on participating, we ask that you please just watch. First on our agenda this evening is an approval of minutes from March 13th, 2025. Has everyone had a chance to review them?
Yes.
All right, do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the Finance Committee minutes from March 13th, 2025.
I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
6 in favor, 1 abstention. All right, moving right along, we have a review of the fiscal year 26 budget for the Senior Center. And with us this evening, we have Deborah Siriani, the Human Services Director.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hi.
We have a pretty simple budget. We were asked by the town manager to tighten the belts this year, as everyone was. And so I went and met with him and John Souza, and we made some cuts in our expense budgets and line items, and then we moved a lot of the things that are still required. I moved to some revolving funds that we have, and because I manage the revolving funds with a little bit of cushion to make sure that we can make sure we survive difficult times, then I do have some flexibility there to be able to do that. So that was about $12,000 worth of expenses that we moved over to revolving funds. And then the rest of the budget is driven by regular step increases for our staff, some longevity, and I'm thankful that we have longevity with our staff, and that's a wonderful thing. And then the other major thing that we asked was the outlay. So we asked for some money from capital outlay to increase our, to be able to replace some fire doors, which are required at the request of the facilities manager. And so the way to manage some of those revolving funds is I've negotiated my contracts to get more money for our nutrition. We've also asked for some earmark money from the state to help support some of our nutrition. As you know, grocery bills go up, and so we're doing okay there. We get some help from the Friends of the Senior Center, and then also we'll be increasing some of the rates for a few of our programs. Hopefully a reasonable rate, but some increases just to keep those revolving funds healthy too. So that's all.
Okay. Any questions?
I noticed that the electricity went down slightly. I was wondering what was driving that, especially since it was up over the last couple of years.
It was based on the actual cost that we were having for the year, and so I asked for that amount of money. Since then, we've got some very large bills, so that may need a couple more thousand.
Okay.
Honestly, it was just in the past month I went, oh gosh. So that will have to be reviewed, depending on how the next few months come.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, the expenses are tight.
Yeah.
Well,
But our solar panels have helped
Right.
a tremendous amount with our energy bills. And so, as you can see, the heat bills are down tremendously. And so we've basically been managing that and moving some of our money from our gas expense line and just helping to pay for the extra electricity. And we've been okay. Knock on wood. It's been a little this year, but. Are there any questions?
else?
Any other questions?
No?
All set?
I have just one dumb question.
Yeah.
When do you
Oh,
become
dumb
a senior?
question. When you become a senior, well, I don't card at the door, but it is.
It's funny.
But But 60 and up is what we consider, so, yeah, right, release the balloons, come on in. And I always say, if you're not old enough to be here, you're young enough to volunteer, so come on in. I'll put you to work.
Good answer.
It's funny.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Just one last
Oh, sure.
comment. There are a bunch of revolving funds, and I forwarded to you
Yep.
from Darlene, and all of them, she says, are in good order. So people should understand that a lot of the funding that goes to the senior center doesn't come out of the town budget. It comes out of a lot of revolving funds, and you do a marvelous job managing them all.
I paid him well to say that.
Out of the revolving
David, you help
funds.
me very much every year.
Didn't see it in the budget. No, I
Well, we were super thankful not to lose any staff, so that was super important to us, and we were lucky enough, not to lose the personnel, because that's really where our work is. So that's why I said, well, I'd rather tighten up things than services, people, so.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Debbie.
welcome,
Great
thank
night.
you.
Thanks,
You too.
Debbie.
Good luck.
too.
Thanks, David.
All right, moving right along, we review the fiscal year 26 budget for the Board of Health. With us this evening is our Public Health Director, Donna Greenwood. Good evening.
Good to see you all. All right, so my budget's a little bit different than the senior center. So if you take a look at the salary line budget,
Sure.
it has changed. Once Sue retired and I replaced Sue Roser as the health director, the assistant health director position was not refilled at that time. And also due to the town layoffs, we are down now one health inspector, which reduces the salary budget in total to $552,142. It's a total reduction of $126,003. But the health department is in a coalition with the Northeast Public Health Alliance, which includes Chelmsford, Borica, Tingsboro, and Tewksbury. And in that health alliance, we do get state grants, which will help fulfill some of the health inspections that need to be done. So we will not lose services from that. It will be fulfilled through a grant. And then when it comes down to the actual budget itself, we were lucky enough to receive a vehicle, which is an electric vehicle this year, that replaced a very old one for the health inspector. Therefore, I moved the $400 that was in the gasoline line into the supply budget to help us continue to run programs and different educational things that we're doing because of the cost of things going up there. Then the other thing is the mosquito expense has increased by $1,000. I increased that to $16,000 because it did happen to increase this year just to cover the same amount of acreage. And we obviously want to have that same service of the mosquito spraying. So when you take a look, overall, the line item expenses only went up $1,000, which is from the mosquito piece. So in total, the budget for the health department is $595,492. And this is a total reduction of $125,003.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions?
Any questions?
Pretty straightforward.
No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Donna.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Don. All right, moving right along this evening, we have a review of the fiscal year 26 budget for the Community Preservation Fund, and we also have a discussion of Article 26 regarding the utility line suppression. With us this evening, we have Linda Prescott, the Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, and we also have Darlene Lucier, our Town Accountant, online.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And again, I have a very different budget than the last two. The Community Preservation Act fund is a little confusing for most people to follow. You're experienced, so you'll understand the housekeeping that we do every spring, which is Darlene places 10% of our income into three major accounts, which would be affordable housing, historic preservation, and conservation, land conservation. So we do that. The final numbers aren't here yet because, it's like it revolves. People ask for money, they, do their project, and then they'll submit their bill. So the final numbers aren't there, but it's pretty close. We also ask for money to fund smaller accounts, and it's for like recreation, and if they have to replace a swing set because it doesn't meet codes anymore, or if a Boy Scout comes in and wants to do a project. You know, it doesn't really need to go to town meeting, so recreation, conservation, they have their own accounts that they can draw small amounts of money from. And those are restocked every year for $50,000 maximum. This year, I was very surprised, but the state, the Department of Revenue, has put out estimates for what we will be getting for our state match. And I don't know how they can do it so early in the year, but they're estimating that we're going to receive $200,474 as a match. And already, and the town will be raising this year about $1.5 million. So we do have a very healthy fund, and we have a healthy fund. So we're able to bond, we're able to meet the needs of the community as they come up. I think I set forward our debt service. You know, we're able to handle that. We just took on a very large debt for Smith Street for affordable housing. That will be paid off in 2041. The second largest one was Chelmsford Woods, and that will be paid off in the 2030s. But we do have some that are coming to an end, like the turf fields, and you know, there are other things. So in the next few years, we will, you know, be paying off some bonds, and at the moment, we really aren't expecting really a big one. So, any questions?
Any questions on the CPC budget?
On the CPC, the state match is coming in November.
Then on the warrant article that's being presented for the utilities line suppression,
Correct.
if you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Paul has requested $2 million to sink the power lines, the utility lines, in the square. It's part of the village improvement plan. There is a problem, and we haven't worked that out yet. But when you read the Community Preservation Act itself, and you follow a chart that was created by the Department of Revenue, utility lines aren't there, and that's a problem. They're not historic. Paul's hanging on to. These buildings are historic because they're over 75 years old. But the Act says, or the DRS says, that they have to have they need to be deemed historically significant, and that takes a hearing, a group of hearings, preferably preserved, and that also takes hearings. So at this point, I know some of the members of the committee don't really comprehend what's going on. They're not experienced in this area. But right now, I think I would like to see Paul withdraw the article and let us work it out. At the end of the fiscal year, I have to make out reports to the Department of Revenue. And each project is itemized, and the Department of Revenue has sent a note that they're changing the form format to make it more precise. You won't be able to kind of fudge over things. So that is a concern, that they will have better control over what's happening. And the Department of Revenue does review the forms, the money that we spend. And I know because several years ago, I was up late at night and I made a typo error, and they were on it. And I do know committees, when they misapprove money and the DOR doesn't approve of it, they demand that it be returned to the fund, and even if the project is in process. So I'm just concerned, and that it's not following what it should be. It's not following the DOR. They're really the last word. And that's the big concern. So I would like to see Paul withdraw the warrant article, and we need to talk about this and the plans. It would be nice if the center, the commercial district down there, would move forward and become a historic district. It would be a historic commercial district. It should not be attached to the one we have already, because the one we have already basically works with residents. Commercial needs are different. But should it become a district, they become very they can receive grants because, you know, the government, all kinds of whatever, they like to give grants to commercial businesses. And like 99% of the grants out there now go to commercial properties. So that would be a big boost for them. They can do, you know, federal grants, there's Main Street. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that they could benefit from. And for the most part, a lot of people don't know about them. But they're out there, and it would be an improvement. And I think it'd be a big benefit for the town and the property owners and the businesses in the town square.
Are you aware of other communities that have used funds in this manner?
Yes, Darlene, I had a Zoom meeting last week, Monday, with Evan, Darlene, and Cindy. And Darlene kept on waving this piece of paper in front of the screen. So I went down afterwards, and I did get a copy of what she was waving around. And it's kind of cut off at one end, and you can't read there isn't an address for the website. So Darlene and I happened to sit down and go over this. And there were lists of communities, but there were two that came up with the lines. And one is, what I was told in the beginning was Chilmark, Martha's Vineyard. It's not Chilmark. It is called Anahana Circle. And that is Wampanoag land. And as you know, with dedicated tribal land, they have their own government, they have their own police force, you know, and they did get money to sink power lines. But they get money anyway. I mean, they're just like a different level of grants. So they were the one. The other one was Hingham. And what they filed with on the database was they sunk some utility lines in an area with a few historic homes. And that's not enough to really say, we need to go ahead and do this. Because it didn't say that they were on a register. I mean, it's just that they're older homes. There was no protection. One thing that the CPC or the CPA wants is when the town grants money, they want guarantees that the money will be there. So when we, like the open space, the land that we have bought, right now Conservation is working very hard to get a conservation restriction on it. And you know, it's got to have some recreation on it, conservation, and they label, you know, you can use it for recreation. We want to keep the apple grove. It's good for, you know, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that go into it. It's very complicated, but we want to protect the town's investment. And that's one thing. If you put down utility lines and a contractor comes in next week, buys all the property and tears it down and puts up some very, like 40B, high density, and wants to paint all the buildings green with purple polka dots, there's nothing the town can do. And we've lost our historic asset. Therefore, sinking the power lines is not historic preservation. I see confused faces.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
I have the document, Linda, that you sent me. Thank you very much. I did have an opportunity just now to read it, and I have a couple of questions for clarification. Under historic resources, yes, it talks about buildings and structures listed on the state register of historic places or determined by the local historic preservation commission to be significant in the history, archaeology, architecture, or culture of the city or town. So it seems like that opens it up a little bit, and
But the word there is significant. And that is a historic designation. And that is more than what the center is now.
but there is no asterisk next to that that word, or there's no other. So for me, right, and for me, it seems like it's giving the cities and towns a little bit of latitude there in the wording on this chart.
When was the Hingham project done?
I don't know.
You don't?
No, I don't.
Good question. question.
Okay.
I really had a hard time getting any information about it. And I did go to the database, CPA database, and it's really vague. I don't remember when it was done. I was just really surprised that it was so vague. I couldn't find anything on a map. You know,
Surprised that bureaucracy is vague. Okay. Paul, could we get a little input here, please?
Come on, I don't bite. Yeah.
Good evening.
Thank you.
So much I want to say. First off, before I presented the article to the select board back in December, I did my homework. I also checked with town council, had an opinion from council. Do you believe that this is an allowable expenditure into community preservation? And obviously the feedback I had from the research as well as from council was that yes, it was an allowable expenditure. The Hingham project, I believe, was done about 15 years ago, so it's not like it's something that's pending review. Certainly, I think the center is historically significant. I think the other thing you'll notice in the past, we've used Community Preservation Fund to fund facade programs in Vinyl Square and in the center. Didn't involve historic districts or historic other votes, determinations, and hearings and other things. I am terribly disappointed to hear the presentation this evening by Linda. I admire what Linda has done for this community and will likely continue to do for this community in terms of a preservation activist. However, I don't believe she's speaking for the committee. The committee met on this article in January and voted unanimously to approve this article. Since that time, Linda, as chair, has scheduled and canceled 2 meetings to reconsider this at her request. Most recently, last evening, there was a meeting scheduled. When I found out on Tuesday that it was canceled, I asked, well, if she's going to be here this evening at 6:30, why don't we have a meeting at 6 o'clock? That didn't occur either. So I guess what I'd ask the committee, and I also offered to bring council virtually to the meeting. That hasn't occurred. So what I'd ask you to do, rather than rendering a decision this evening, is I can also have council attend your meeting if you have any legal questions. And again, I would ask, because I don't want to see this repeated at town meeting, because I believe that this project is supported by the community and will be supported by the community, and I don't think we need to go through that. And I hope that the commission will, at the chair's request, schedule a meeting prior to town meeting as soon as possible to avoid this so that it can get in your report and recommendations and that you can make an informed decision. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Do we feel like we would want to hear from town council?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, if you could invite him, a representative from
Next
KP
Thursday.
Law next Thursday,
Okay,
I'd be appreciated. I'll put it on the agenda.
great, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want to rebuttal with what Paul just said. The meetings were canceled for lack of quorum. And as of the meeting tonight, I have some serious elderly parent problems. And I knew I could be here, and I may not have even been here on time. But, you know, I do have a life. But I go on, I'm following what the CPA regulations are. We've worked with Stuart Saganar, who is the director of the coalition. He's the guy that helped write the bill. He's the guy that finds the extra money on Beacon Hill. He has the most experience. I also follow the direction of the Department of Revenue, because if this project passes and the department gets this information, in the summer or the fall, they can reject it. And I don't think that's a good thing for the town to go through. And I'm sorry, but I kind of put my bet on the coalition and what the information that the Department of Revenue sent out.
Did you have any conversations with the Department of Revenue directly?
No, I don't. I work through Stuart.
Okay.
And, he's the guy that gives us all the legal counsel. And, he's worked with it for decades.
So has Stuart said anything about this particular?
Yeah, he says it's not qualified. He's very adamant about it.
So what would happen if town meeting approved it, we started it, and it gets rejected?
Well, the AG would have to approve it first.
So it has to be approved anyways.
Right.
Tell me, it's
So-
at this point, Paul's got it on the warrant, and if it's approved, it's approved, and the project will go ahead. If I have to make a report, itemized reports at the end of the fiscal year to the Department of Revenue, and as I stated early, they do review them. Now, if the Department of Revenue, and you all had a copy of, their definitions of historic, if they feel that this project is not within the definition of historic, where the money is supposed to be spent, then they have every right to take, claim that the project must pay the fund back the money,
So,
So, but what's the down, I just like,
Which one is it?
$2 million.
so, but, does that mean we just stop the project? Like, do we have to go ahead, I guess I'm trying to understand, what's the downside of moving forward with this? And if it gets, say the Department of Revenue says, no, this isn't fun, do we just don't go ahead? Like, can we just not, do we have enough time to not go ahead, I guess?
well, I guess it depends on a couple of things. Depends on the approval by the AG's office, then it depends upon RFPs that are put out in order for the work to be done in coalition with Verizon and National Grid, who's also funding part of the
Plenty of
project.
time to not spend the.
The only concern would be the timing, but I think the timing where the reports are due at the end of the fiscal year will be reviewed by the DOR. At the same time, the AG will take us some time to have approval, and getting an RFP out, that can always be delayed to
To wait.
coincide with that, yeah. The only thing would be, the work might be pushed out because of that.
But I guess,
I just,
right, but I
Can I-
guess it's late,
yeah.
can I just, to make an, so we're talking more about funding here. So the funding is going to be $1 million is going to come from the undesignated or the reserve, and then we're borrowing $1 million. So, and when we do the borrowing, the funding to pay that borrowing back is through CPC. So if it gets rejected by the DOR, it's just a funding source. You could move forward with the project. We would have to just change the funding source, would not come through CPC. We would be borrowing, but we'd have to find a way to, we wouldn't be able to take $1 million from the unreserved from CPC, and the borrowing would have to be paid, that $1 million would have to be paid probably through another source.
But
of
Darlene,
funding.
would the borrowing have to be done before we get a decision?
No, we
Okay,
don't,
then-
we wouldn't need to do a borrowing at this point, because the project's gonna take, this would just be an approval to go ahead with the borrowing and to, but this is, we're talking probably a year or so out. I mean,
Okay.
this isn't gonna be happening this fiscal year at all.
So if this
We're not gonna be
particular,
spending anything this year.
certainly, so yeah, so if this particular project were to be approved, but then we found out that the funding source was not available, it could either not be borrowed at all, or a different funding source could be determined.
Different
But we,
funding source.
but we wouldn't be another year down the road with increased costs and increased planning.
No, we would just, what would happen is if they got approved under CPC right now, and then we found that it wasn't an approved CPC project, we would just go back to town meeting
Yep.
and you would just reverse out.
It'd be
The
a
article.
change of the funding source.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it'd already be approved, ostensibly be approved through town meeting.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it'll take a year for National Grid and Verizon.
Oh,
least.
I have no concern about that,
It's
yeah.
not like we'd be so deep into it that it would be,
Okay.
So there's no real harm then to go down this route.
This is just this is just an authorization to move forward with the project, and then it would give the treasurer authorization to borrow if need be, if the project was to move forward and all that. But we're, like Paul just said, we're talking, years out,
So
so.
we've got plenty of time to explore this as a potential,
And if it gets rejected, it gets rejected.
right, no
Right.
harm, no
Yeah.
foul.
Then we find another place to,
Yeah, or
Right.
this gets set in a different,
But I would hate
list
to
of
not
priorities.
ask for it and then use a different source and find out years later that other towns are being able to do
Do
it.
it, right, like
Right.
that's the,
Right.
yeah, that would be
So
the,
far, I mean, you've read the DOR
But there's always a first time.
right.
first time.
that's right.
so far, you know.
Never hurts
there's
to
been
ask.
There's been no action on Beacon Hill to change it.
Okay.
So, I mean,
I used to say for years that they'd never changed the threshold for estate tax plan, for estate taxes. They changed it in 2023, retroactive at the beginning of the year. Things happen.
Yeah, things do happen, I agree. But I just, you know, I have to deal with the information that I have, and
Sure.
I understand I understand the act and how it's financed, and who can, you know, who checks up on us and stuff like that.
Okay.
So it's my responsibility to bring that forward,
Okay.
okay?
Someone
No,
else who
we're
wants to
okay?
speak?
But,
Yeah, John's,
John?
John's up.
Mr. Chairman, just if I may speak as an individual member of the Community Preservation Committee. So many of you know I serve on an elected member of the Planning Board. I'm the appointed member to the Community Preservation Committee from the Planning Board. So just to set the record straight, the Community Preservation Committee met back in January. The committee at that time voted to support this project. There was a discussion about the funding source. At that meeting, I presented a plan that assumed that we would borrow the whole thing. Sort of just an exercise to show what if, you know, could we afford to borrow this whole thing? There was some discussion. I then said I would look at it again and come back at a later date. 2 times for 2 consecutive months, the meeting has been posted and then abruptly canceled, and it has not been due to a lack of quorum. There was a dispute via email whether or not there should be a Zoom component of the meeting, but there was no lack of quorum by the members that answered, so I just want to set that straight. 2 times I've sent out to all the committee my revised financing plan showing that we would use half of the money from the cash amounts from community preservation, and then we would borrow the remaining $1 million. Unfortunately, I've been able to get it to the committee members, but we've never had an opportunity to meet and discuss it.
Okay.
So that's where we stand right now.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. Any further questions? All right.
Nope.
Seeing none, thank you. We'll move on to review of the fiscal year 26 budget for the fire department. With us this evening, we have Fire Chief Gary Ryan.
thank you.
Building department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't wait. You dare give it to me?
Hey, wait a second, we can talk about this at the meeting.
So good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. I hope everybody's doing well.
You as well.
You got the presentation, if we can kick it off at the next slide. So this is a look at our current state. So currently, we have 61 uniform members, and I am happy to say that all our positions are filled. I think it's one of the first times in a while I've been able to say that. So we do have 2 members in the academy. They're scheduled to graduate next month, and then we do some in-house training, and it'll be shift strength. So we are in a pretty good position right now. So thanks to everybody for that. For fiscal 26, next slide, please. After meeting with the town manager, finance director John Souza, some members of this committee, I'm proposing a fiscal 26 budget of $7,703,848. On the personnel side, that is $6,969,934. That's just over a 2% increase. That really kind of factors in contractual step raises, obligations. Does not include future labor agreements. The contract expires July 1st, so there are no funding in this budget for that, because we have not come to an agreement yet. So this is a level service budget. On the expense side, a budget of $733,914. I know it came up earlier in the presentation from one of the other department heads about utilities. We are certainly impacted by that. Our utilities are up. I put electricity, that is up 37%. So currently, right now, I am over both for heat and electricity in this current budget. And that's probably the first time that's happened. Sometimes it's one or the other. We're over in both. Now, you have to consider we have 5 stations. We have a mechanics bay, and behind Engine 4, over Raymond Neck Road, we also have another garage. So it takes a lot of utilities to keep that up and running. Fire equipment repairs up 13%. That includes our Scott packs, hydraulic extrication tools, hand tools, and gas meters. Building maintenance, again, I will go over the age of the buildings, but 5 stations, mechanics bay, that's up 6%, and vehicle maintenance is up 10%. So the overall budget is an increase of 2.65%. That maintains existing staffing levels at 63.5, which is 61 uniform members and 2.5 staff. So no changes there. Next slide, please. Take a look at our current organizational chart. We have 4 groups or units, as we call them, each managed by a company officer, 13 firefighters assigned to each unit. We have a captain assigned to training. We have a mechanic, 2 captains assigned to the fire prevention office with administrative support staff. And if there's any questions, please jump in. Next slide, please. This is a look at a typical staffing configuration. So typically, we would have a captain, 11 firefighters. Just happens today that we have an extra firefighter in the center station. So typically, we would have in the fire headquarters next door, a captain and 2 firefighters. Up north, 3 firefighters assigned. Engine 3 over at Roberts Field or Westwood Road, 2 firefighters. Engine 4 in east, 2 firefighters. And Engine 5 down on Acton Road, 2 firefighters. And we know from our 3-year fire station study committee, from town meeting, from studies and resources, that we know that the 5-station configuration has served this community well for response times. So, next slide. Talking about stations, we just hit the 10-year mark next door. Back in December, we hit the 10-year anniversary. On that same day, we hit the 3-year mark for the Engine 2 building. Our 2 oldest stations are Engine 3 and 5, but we know from town meeting we are working to replace those. And Engine 4 just hit the 48-year mark. Next slide, please. The National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, just recently issued their 5th needs assessment report on the nation's fire service. In the report noted, no surprise here, anybody's been to a town meeting, the country is falling further behind in replacing aging fire stations, primarily due to escalating costs. So it is estimated in this report $143 billion would be needed to replace aging is 40 years and above, fire stations nationwide. There are estimated 26,000 fire stations without separate facilities for men and women. That is something that was presented for town meeting, which is kind of notable since the first paid career female firefighter was hired in 1973. Again, that was an issue that we had, and the cost of replacing the aging fire stations has doubled since 2019. So I bring that up because certainly very thankful to this body, to the town manager, to the committee, and to our residents for really addressing our fire station needs. So I appreciate the support. Next slide. Taking a look at 2024, calls went up slightly, 0.08% from 2023. Increases in structure fires, vehicle fires, alarm activation calls, public assistance calls, but if you go down to the bottom, mutual aid, beyond our traditional mutual aid responses to Barica, to Lowell, to Tingsboro, to Westford, we had in the fall task force activations to Georgetown, to Middletown, to Wilmington, and North Reading. Next slide, please.
Actually,
Sure.
I don't know what a lock-in, lock-out is.
A lock-in, lock-out is if you, and we had one today, if you get locked in your vehicle.
So electric.
If you lock yourself out of your vehicle, I should say.
Okay.
But we actually had some kids stuck in a vehicle this past week, young kids.
That
So
happens.
that is actually a lock-in. But sometimes you're locked out of your vehicle, and people get locked out of their homes. We have older people, residents, that lock themselves out, and we get that call. Sometimes we will get it from young people who come home late, lock themselves out and don't realize it till they get in about 2 in the
Sometimes
morning.
little kids lock themselves
They
in
do.
the bathroom and with a lock on the door.
But with today's technology for
My son
cars,
did that.
we're seeing a little less of
And
that.
through it.
But we're kind of balancing with the older residents for the home, so it's
And-
kind of balancing
It's a
off.
wash.
Vehicle fires, do they come from accidents or just sometimes the thing's on fire?
Both,
Okay.
they do both. Okay. Any other, okay. Okay, next slide, this, when we take a look at 2024, January, I have it highlighted because the 600 calls that we had in January 2024, the highest amount of calls that we've had in a month for several years, going back before COVID. We responded to 6,369 calls, averaged 530 a month, or 18 a day. Next slide, please.
Chief, do these numbers include the calls that you get when there are accidents on the highway?
Yes,
Yeah,
it's all
okay.
factored in, yes.
Excellent, thank you.
Taking a closer look at medical responses, we responded to 4,330 medical calls. That medical calls continue to climb. It's a 3.9% increase from last year. We averaged 361 a month. Medical responses in total represent about 68 to 70% of our total responses. As the population get older, medical calls are.
Is it age-driven, or is there something else?
Chelmsford has an older population. When I say older population, it's if you look at Middlesex County, we're not just, it's older than even our neighboring communities, and in Middlesex County. And I think that's a testament because people like to stay here. You know, live, work, play, and stay, right?
Right.
Taking a look at individual engine company responses next door at the fire headquarters, we have an engine, a ladder, rescue. The brush truck was used quite a bit. So we had over 2,462 responses from the fire headquarters. Engine 2 remains consistent at 1,669. What kind of jumps out is Engine 4, still a very active station, and it was closed a few times for staffing issues, but overall increases throughout. And my thanks to my staff, to my members, for a very busy year. Next slide.
What is a brush truck?
Brush truck has it's a vehicle, like a pickup truck, has a tank on the back that we can take off-road.
Oh, so if you're having a brush fire inside.
Brush fire, we can actually bring it off pavement on paths.
Thank you.
Looking at top responses, really nothing, when you take, and I've gone over this before, your typical calls that we respond to, your nursing homes like Palm Manor, Sunny Acres, your assisted living facilities like the residents at Freeman Lake, AFC Urgent Care, nothing really surprising there. What jumps out in this is the former Best Western. That continues to climb now that it's changed its use to a shelter. We went 126 times last year. That is a 43% increase from 2023. And I put it in 2019 because when it was run as a hotel, it's a 472% increase since 2019. And we've had meetings on this locally, police, fire, health department. It's not just the number of calls, but also kind of the nature of the calls and kind of the time commitment that is needed when we get there. So, next slide, please. I have over 20 years of fire data here. But if you take a look at 2024, the 52 calls for incidents, that includes everything from 13 structure fires, 20 vehicle fires, 10 cooking fires, dumpster fires, equipment fires. If you go to the column to the far right, dollar loss, you see over $700,000. That ranges from a $400 shed damage on River Neck Road to the Popeyes fire that we had back last May, which was about $380,000 to $400,000. So that is kind of the range we have. Next slide, please. Kind of we discussed it earlier, wildfires, no surprise, it was a historic wildfire season in Massachusetts, started in September. Conditions were ripe. We had abnormally dry conditions. You had the added fuel load of the leaf drops, above average temperatures, and low humidity. Last year, statewide, we had over 1,200 brush fires. From October through the end of November, you had 658, more than half. Year to date, and this number kind of jumps out, they had over 4,500 acres for the year. 4,000 of that occurred between October and November. The state of Connecticut had to use resources outside the state for the first time in 30 years, from New York, California, Idaho, Canada. Fortunately, in Massachusetts, we had our statewide task force, so that meant we got to use local resources to address our needs. However, I had a recent conversation with the director from the Department of Conservation and Recreation. We were on the very cusp of calling in some of those outside state resources. And it's important to note that we're still in drought conditions. So, and again, my thanks to our members. It was a very busy fall. A lot was asked of them, and they delivered. So, my thanks to them.
And,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The start of the brush fires mostly come from,
What's that?
how did the brush fires start?
It's a good question. So, some are campfires, and some that I went to, I believe, Middleton. they believe it, and it's not, you know, they investigate it, but it could be someone starting them. So every fire is investigated. But some of the ones the bigger ones were, unfortunately, somebody had a little cooking fire, campfire, that just got out of control. So, again, just taking a closer look, if you look at the red, this is going back to 2018 state data. The average is in blue, 2024 is in red. If you look from January, go through the months to August, 2024 was below average for brush fires. Then we hit September. September jumped 76% in wildfire activity. October, we hit 1,300 jump. So, again, I know we got some rain, some snow, but still, we went from an extreme drought conditions, downgraded to drought. So we're still there. Next slide, please. The issue of water supply, hydrants, it's been a discussion, it's been in the news, social media. So I figured I'd kind of touch upon it. This is a headline from the New York Times. This is actually describing the fire issues out in LA. Go to the next slide. But we've had our issues locally. We've had our concerns about hydrants here, a discussion at the select board a couple of years ago. This is March 6th from the Lowell Sun, an issue with the city of Lowell.
So how do we test? How do we test the hydrants? Yeah.
So we have 3 water districts, and I can, maybe if you bring up the next slide, I can touch on that.
How about that?
Which is why I wanted to bring this up, because I've had other people ask me this question, so.
Beating us, but.
Right.
Chelmsford has,
Like it was
3
planned.
water districts, right? So the red, I know is a lot of color right there, but the red is the center water districts. They have over 1,500 hydrants. Up north is green, close to 400. East has 130. So we are well served by the hydrants. We have hydrants within 500 feet of every structure. And how they're tested is the 3 water districts, north, east, and center test the hydrants. We have close to 24 million gallons of water. So we are well served by the water source.
Do they,
Senator, go
so
ahead.
when the water districts test, do they reach out to you, provide you with like a readout? Are you, I guess,
I have ongoing conversations with them.
okay,
They don't update me all the time. I mean, we have pretty good conversations
Okay.
about replacements, older hydrants, where the hydrants are. So, I feel actually we're having improved conversations. We got new commissioners in the center and up north. So, I think we're having more communication. They help me with this. So certainly they're sharing data. I think the conversations have improved.
now who goes out, so how do they,
The water department.
The water
but how
department's
do they, how
responsible.
do they test, do have people go out and actually
Oh, yeah.
test it?
They
actually
do a
open
flow
up.
test.
Oh, okay, they do a flow
They do a
test.
flow test. They'll open them up.
What did we
That's
say?
when you see that they'll put a notice out that your water might be brown.
Yep.
But they want to see the pressure. They want to see the volume that you get out of that.
So what you'll see is they put out notices through social media, on their website, sometimes in other manners, and they'll say they'll be flushing beyond these dates. You may have discoloration. If it's discoloration, run your bathtub for a little while, stuff like that. That's how you'll know. And I've seen it, especially since, I know, so I'm in North, since the new commissioner's gone in, I've seen those notices a lot more that I hadn't seen in years. So
But when they flush, do they flush all the hydrants? Because that's a lot of hydrants in center.
they don't.
They don't do them all at once.
no.
Otherwise, they'll do so.
There'll be
they
a
do so many.
catastrophic pressure loss.
The reason why I asked, because I haven't seen, like, other than East, so I don't think I've seen them flushing in, notices in a while.
Because they try to do it on off hours because it does discolor water. If you're in
Oh,
the
okay.
center district, it does disrupt businesses, so they try to do it early, try to do it late. So same thing with North. They try not to disrupt the business.
And wintertime, now we haven't had big gads of snow like we've had in other years.
Right.
Who's supposed to dig it out? I mean,
The water departments are responsible for it, but we do have a hydrant, a volunteer thing for the fire service. So people can volunteer to dig out the hydrants. And actually, in this town, we're very fortunate. We do have people help us out. So, but the water department that's their responsibility.
But you'll see that it is requested that if people are able, that they.
when we had 3 young sons at home, and they were bribable, yeah, we would do it, but it wasn't anything formal.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's called an adopt a hydrant program, so people.
But there's a formal thing if somebody formally wanted to do it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So. Okay, next slide. Kind of looking at our fire prevention office, we had an increase of number of permits. We issued 1,779 permits. and we brought in $57,000. We issue permits over 25 categories, the largest being fire protection systems. If you sell your home, the fire department has to go out, do smoke carbon monoxide inspections, make sure your detectors are compliant. Home sales went up, so our inspections went up. Open burning permits went up last year. And also hot work, you'll see that that went up. So we had more commercial renovations in 2024. That drove the welding and hot work permits up. So increased commercial work, increased permits. So
You think you're getting them all?
we hope so. For that, we have to try to get those are the, that's when you get in trouble, so. But yeah, so we actually have, with the state, they actually have to have a watch for the hot work permits. Because of the dangers associated with it.
Did you see a decrease when there was a push into shark bite type plumbing work where they're not using welding as often?
So if that's always the discussion, is it soldering or hot work? So
Yeah.
that's a discussion, which is fortunate being in this building. So we can have those conversations with the plumbing inspector who's just down the hall, so, yes. Yep.
Good.
Looking at our staff vehicles, that vehicle that you see there is the Fire 3 command vehicles that our officers work out of. We were fortunate to get approval from the capital committee in the fall. So we are advancing that to Springtown meeting, and hopefully we'll get approval. That is up for $111,000 for the replacement vehicle. And our last slide, we'll look at the fire apparatus. So last year, we placed the order for the new engine 5. When the town manager signed the contract, it was the first one for an engine that went over $1 million. The prices are going up. Unfortunately, that engine is projected to take, we will not take that possession of that vehicle to 2027.
Right.
In the big ticket item, I will bring it out, so fiscal 2029. We are proposing a replacement of the ladder truck, so I just mentioned that. So currently, that price tag is $2,680,000. I say currently.
Currently.
Currently. And I say 3 years for the engine. The tower ladder could be longer. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
And we keep the fire truck, at least one or two in reserve, right?
Correct, yes.
And then assume that eventually we'll dispose of some. So I'm hoping that the elevated price of new trucks would also pass through to an elevated cost or price of a used truck. Is that
So
right?
when we put one out, we'll, the town has a process called municipal bid, we'll put them out there. But you're absolutely right. You'll see there are people that are keeping their vehicles longer. Your maintenance costs are going up. But yes, on the positive side for us, when we get to that point, about 3 years from now, that it should drive the price up.
And who buys the used stuff?
It depends. There are some fire departments that will get it. The last one that we sold was a vendor. He takes them, does a little work on them, and then he just sells them to, sometimes it's small departments, like our old ladder truck is up in New Hampshire. The old Quint, it's up there.
Oh, that's where it is?
Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions? No. All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you for your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Why don't we
Seeing
put
as-
Chris up?
yeah, it's, can I have a, well, actually, yeah, if you pop out and ask him. Next on our agenda this evening is a review of the zoning bylaw amendments, which includes warrant Article 28,
Article 28, right?
Route 129 Business Amenities Overlay District, and presenting this evening is our town manager, Paul Cohen. Let me bring up the presentation.
All right, thank you. Just a few slides this evening. This is another one that's wading in other waters. This article is a request to rezone the portion of basically the Center Village Overlay District to zone the amenities portion, as I call it, but the fast casual dining. You can see this is the language of the motion where we be amending section 145C out of 195, 145C to basically maintain, and I want to make this point, we're maintaining the limit on only 3 such drive-through facilities in the district. However, the reason I'm moving this forward is we've had 9 years under this bylaw. And after 9 years, we've only seen one restaurant amenity in the district, and that being Press Cafe. And they've done phenomenally successful. Sadly, despite that phenomenal success, we've not seen anybody else come in, to join in the success because it's an attractive parcel. It's located adjacent to Route 3. It's on 129, a numbered route. You're at the town line. There's certainly ample traffic volume and so forth. So how this sort of came to fruition is I've always had my eye, obviously, on the development of the town, and in particular that parcel that sort of brought this to the genesis of where the Lighthouse School was. And you'd see I know you probably shouldn't have used green, but that's what the program uses. But it's the parcel you can see that's surrounded by interchange. He's got the pointer there, but you can see he's got it in red. So there you go. It's that parcel. It most recently housed the Lighthouse School, and then prior to that, it housed what was Lifelinks, and the property is now vacant. There you go. It's all that area.
Pretty clear.
So the property owner came forward and met with Evan Polanski, community development director, and me, and basically said, look, we're having a challenge, as we know, with the office market of finding a tenant. They also weren't able to find a new school tenant for the property. And he basically brought in their marketing people that assist them. And they said, this would be an attractive parcel for drive-through amenities. However, the current building can't conform with the bylaw because the current bylaw does not allow for standalone drive-through, which is what you have at Press Cafe, where you have the drive-through at the end, but it's attached to the building, and Triton and Systems and so forth is in the building. So my concern continues to be, how do we make our commercial corridor attractive, particularly in the year 2025 going forward? And I think the vision from 9 years ago remains, is that we need to have more amenities out there in the district. And so what I'm requesting is to modify the zoning bylaw, maintaining, as I said, the 3 establishments maximum. But now in the area on Billerica Road from Alpha Road, which was a great addition from the planning board when I met with them, to the Billerica town line, as well as that area on Mill Road, is the only place that the standalone drive-throughs could be seated. Now, you can still have other restaurants in the remaining of the corridor, but yet we've not seen any evidence of that occurring. And the reason for that is, in speaking to them, is what's unique about that parcel, not only is it surrounded by the interchange, and therefore there's no residential abutters and really kind of isolated on the edge and the fringe of the district, is, your 90+% of your traffic is going to come from 129, either from Route 3 or 129 from Billerica and or Chelmsford. And it just works. And the only way it works is somebody has to take the investment to raise the building and then finance, the construction. And we saw across the street from there, we permitted, and never took place, a strip plaza. And they never even were able to find tenants. And they end up basically like converting the plaza to, a social, educational care facility. So what would happen here is, again, you're only allowed from Alpha Road to the town line, because we're not spot zoning, but we're just addressing that area of the corridor, to allow for standalone drive-throughs. What's envisioned at this site is to be 2 independent standalone drive-throughs, as you can see by the next slide, that shows how it could lay out on this particular parcel. And again, it's not restricted to this parcel. As a building was recently raised in the corridor because of the office decline. But this is what you could envision out there. But the beauty, if it were to be at this location, is it's at the traffic signalized intersection of Mill Road and Billerica Road. So you're not going to have an issue of traffic, problems of left turns and so forth. So that's a scenario in how it could occur. The other component of it, quite frankly, is the other thing the town benefits from this is the additional amenities. And I did speak to a major employer out there and say, what do you think the reaction would be if you had a, drive-through coffee establishment and another drive-through food establishment? And the response I got from a major employer out there would be, yeah, that would be welcomed, because there's only one choice out there right now. And the other benefit to the community is you'd get meals tax out of this. Because as it stands right now I use the words right now, from Drum Hill to the end of Route 3 at 128, there's really nowhere convenient to get off the highway in either direction to, go stay in your car and get something to eat or a coffee, that kind of thing. And I think that, to me, is the difference. And we're seeing this interest in what I think are what you call your, drive-through casual restaurants, to have that, because one thing we've seen particularly since the pandemic, is people don't want to get out of their cars. And that creates two good things. One is it won't create, too much of a hassle at the site, but also it doesn't create much of a septic load either in terms of sewerage, because believe it or not, that there's the Title V for drive-throughs, because most people not only don't want to get out of their car for, to go into the restaurant, they usually don't get out of their car to use the facilities either. So that's a component of it as well. But at the end of the day, this is not going to lead, I don't believe, to the change of the character of the business district. It's on the fringe, it's at the highway, it's surrounded, as I said, on three sides. There's no more that can be done. And then the last slide is why I put that in is, under the special permit process, the planning board can control the aesthetics from the exterior of the facility. And that's what they did with the CVS. I know, because I was here, when they first came in with the designs for the CVS facility, it was not going to look like that. Okay, and so that gives me the assurance and confidence that if this were to be approved and somebody were to come to the planning board through the special permitting process, that the planning board is going to do the right thing and say, hey, we want a facility that looks appropriate, in this area, and I think that can be done architecturally and so forth. And so, I just think it's beneficial to the town, and again, I just think it's an opportunity that we can enhance our corridor, without, I don't believe, any significant downside. So that's my presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have questions.
Any questions? Yes.
I have to tell you, there is no drive-through. I have a food issue there's no drive-through I can have, so it's not anything personal, so I'm asking questions. So is this meant so that you have this parcel of land that some entity would like to move on, and this would be something that would turn over quickly? Is this part of the reason why you're asking for, because what's to say the place that just got knocked down up the street wouldn't, oh, wow, we can have a lot of places here?
Well, they could, but the limit is you can only have 3 under the bylaw. We already have 1. Press Cafe counts as 1 drive-through. You can only have 3 under the zoning, and that would remain under this. So yes, theoretically, they could come in and apply. I don't know how their economic model would warrant, because that's a much larger size parcel and it's also significantly further from the highway. But yes, one of the things in today's reality.
But that parcel that got knocked down, that could have a sit-down restaurant.
Sure, and that can happen anyway.
Okay.
In other words, this doesn't prevent a sit-down restaurant from being in the corridor. That can happen. There's only a limit on drive-through restaurants in the corridor. We can have as many. We can have as many sit-down restaurants that we want.
So that particular plot, because it's hard to say,
The one that's
size.
been
How
knocked
many?
out.
How large is that enclosed plot? How many acres?
This one?
Yeah.
I think it's on the plan. It's not that huge.
Somewhere.
big.
A little bit of an eye chart. Yeah, I have it in front of me. I can't see.
Yeah.
I'd have to pull up the GIS, and I'm not doing that right now.
I'd have to go.
We can look into that.
Yeah, because because you say, oh, you can put 2 places on 3 acres. okay, I can see that. I'm gonna put two restaurants on 10,000 feet. What? You know, just,
But again, you still have, it's not by right, still have to go through the permitting process.
Exactly.
Input from the fire department, from the, you know,
It's not
from the
free rein.
planning board and so forth, and police,
285,
all that input's gonna occur, you know, on this parcel, so.
285?
It might be.
I think
Yep.
it's 285.
Yep, it's 2.5 acres.
okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have a,
Which is smaller than the one that they just knocked down at 270. Yeah, it's much larger.
And I think there's already a permitting process for that property. Yeah.
Yes.
That's, yeah, the one on 270 is 7 acres.
is where's gonna be what?
It's 7 acres,
And
and that's
do you,
gonna be.
anybody know what's gonna go there?
Yeah,
Just-
distribution center.
Oh.
I voted against it.
Yeah.
Sole person on the planning board that did. Just for the-
Distribution centers, no jobs, no jobs.
And Paul, these
But
restaurants.
also, I think that, you're right on the edge of that, because again, you can only go as far as Alpha Road. And I think that might.
That might
Yeah,
scoot just
yeah,
past.
I think it
just
scoots past Alpha
yeah.
Road, but,
Is the idea that these restaurants will also have seating inside?
Yes.
To some degree?
yes,
Okay.
oh, yes, yeah, they are, yeah.
It
yes.
requires,
Requires, it
30.
even requires patio
30?
seating.
Okay.
Even
Okay.
requires patio seating, so yes, it's meant to have, have indoor and outdoor seating.
Okay, thank you.
That's where you see line G, what would be line G, must provide for outdoor seating / eating areas. Must provide for consumption of food on the premises. Minimum of 30 interior seats, 2,000 square foot minimum gross area. So yes.
Why the requirement for outdoor seating, eating areas? I mean, does it matter?
it was part of the original bylaw that
I
went
see.
into effect and, on the overlaid, and it was, the idea was to have the availability for outdoor eat, work, play type of
I see,
situation.
I see.
And it was one of the
Okay.
requests, I think it was brought up by a couple of the businesses in the area that they'd have somewhere to eat outside.
Okay.
I know specifically, I've spoken with someone at one of those large businesses, might be the same one,
Yeah.
that said that, speaking with his colleagues, they'd love to have other places to go. They love the Prestas there, and
Yeah.
they love, because they don't like going to their cafeteria all the time, but they'd love to have other options.
Good, okay.
So just a broader question, I'm relatively new in town here, it's just the vision of that overlay, right? Because I've, very interested in real estate development over time, and there's this concept of a livable, walkable place. And so you've seen it executed in different places, where I used to work down in Watertown in Arsenal Yards. Basically what they did is they took that whole area, it was a dead mall, and they redeveloped it into something that everyone loves now. Right? It's got grocery stores, it's got a hotel, it's got everything else. I'm not saying that's what I'm advocating here. I also now work at, where I work now is owned by New Balance, right? It's right in Boston. When you go on the Pike, you've got Warrior Rink, where the Bruins practice, right? That's that development. New Balance owns that entire street, basically, right? And so they've taken this concept of saying, let's do a mixed-use development that is something that's attractive to people, and you mix all these things together, and then everyone just really enjoys it. And so there's generally a lot of attraction for business owners. There's a lot of attraction for people that come and visit, because you have everything that you'd really need at your fingertips there, right? So I guess, what's the vision for that area of town? Is it eventually to do something similar to that, or is it
So,
just sort of?
yeah, so one of the vision, because I was part of this discussion 10 years ago when we started it, I think, was to have that live, work, play environment, and to allow through the overlay that ability. And that overlay does allow for that ability. We have the problem is a lot of these buildings that were built back when computer systems were huge, and you had big facilities for a lot of people. But one of the problems we have with that is they're all privately owned. And so being privately owned and being parcels that aren't a giant parcel like you'd see, like one of the key things you said was New Balance owns that entire strip. That's not the case here. So I'd love to see something like a Linfield area or something like in Burlington at 3rd Avenue. The problem is you need bigger space and lots of parcels that are owned by the same person to do that. And so I think the goal here is to try to have those restaurants and the amenities that weren't allowed there previously, and that's what the overlay did. The process is getting someone or multiple owners to say, yeah, no, that's where we want to go. And I think the purpose of this article is to bring some of that in, but to the amendment to the article is to bring some of that in. But you can't force a private owner to do something, and that's part of the main discussion.
I mean, the only thing you could do is encourage them to get together and pool all their land so that they realize the value of a redevelopment across all the land would actually benefit all of them.
Yeah,
That's
and
about the
then
only thing you could do.
the problem too is the overlay, when we were a little late with the overlay. And then when we,
The pandemic didn't help.
and then we had, well, so I was just going down, then we got hit with the pandemic. So even though it's been 10 years, like, we did the overlay, then we got hit with the pandemic, and we're now, 5 years later, now seeing people like really beginning to go back to work, right? Like, there's more and more, there's some, mix of in the office and working from home mix. So, which correlates to our vacancy rates, right? Like,
Right.
around the pandemic, or right before the pandemic, we were up, and Paul, correct me on this, but 19%, and now we're down to 5% in vacancies in town, right? So, again, yes, it has been a lot, period of time since the overlay, but it didn't help. The pandemic certainly didn't help our traction on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? All right, thank you. Discard my annotations. Oh, we don't need that anymore. And continuing on with our agenda this evening, we have a review of the fiscal year, the zoning bylaw amendments for warrants Articles 31 and warrant Articles 32. And with us this evening, we have Chris LaValle, the Vice Chair of the Planning Board. And let me just bring up your first presentation.
Okay. Open up. Let's download it.
And I first want to thank you for having me tonight. And I want to mention for Article 31 that the changes that we're proposing are not actually related to the MBTA zoning, despite the title, the initial title of the article. These were changes that were suggested as part of the general zoning bylaws when the Attorney General's office did their review of our MBTA zoning. So to avoid any misunderstanding at town meeting, we're trying to not use the terminology MBTA zoning.
fair.
It's good marketing.
That'll bring up a whole other discussion. So as I mentioned, these are the Attorney General Office recommendations after their 90-day review. So you can, I pretty much mentioned that slide, so you can skip that. There are three areas where the Attorney General's office saw potential issues. The first is erosion control, where they saw possible conflicting language with special permits and as-of-right projects. The second area is in waivers and consideration of fiscal impacts, basically how projects impact town services. And the third one is in the definition of family. So what we did is we had town council review the recommendations. Town council felt that no changes were needed in the erosion control because of our procedures, really spelled out the differences. But he did recommend changes for the second and third recommendations. So what I did is I went through all of the appropriate sections of our bylaws to find where these references were. The Attorney General only mentioned a few examples, so we wanted to make sure that we did a comprehensive search. So I found the examples, or found all of the instances, brought it to the planning board, and we made the edits. So the first one is the summary of bylaw school impacts, essentially. And essentially, impacts to school facilities is not an allowed impact for the planning board to consider in its projects. We can consider all other impacts to town services, financial impacts, but we cannot consider the impact to our school districts. So we are proposing to remove the specific references to school facilities in section 195-61 and actually specifically mention excluding public school system impacts in the special permit process. Because we had just generally mentioned that we could consider adequacy of utilities and other public services in those bylaws. So we wanted to explicitly remove the school system from those impacts. The last one is in the family definition. And if you look at the the cross-out language, that was our original family definition, and the Attorney General's office found that it might potentially pose some problems if challenged in court. So they recommended the Brookline definition that was approved by the Attorney General some time ago, and so that is the one-line definition that we've proposed. In addition, the definition of dwelling, we essentially considered it just a dwelling unit as opposed to 3 or more family dwelling units. And that is essentially the presentation for that article.
Okay, any questions?
How did the planning board vote on this?
Unanimous recommendation for approval. All right, so for Article 32, this is changes that we're proposing to the floodplain bylaw and floodplain map. So back in 1968, the municipalities who are participating in the National Flood Insurance Act of 1968 are required to follow certain bylaws and certain maps. The benefits to being in that national insurance program are community-wide access to federal flood insurance, even if you're not living within the floodplain itself, access to federal disaster relief, access to federal mortgage insurance in the floodplain, and then zoning regulations that help protect the community. So why are these changes needed? FEMA developed these detailed requirements and an updated floodplain map, and these actual current requirements that they're proposing are not new. They've been in place for decades, but most Massachusetts communities have not even adopted them yet, including us. Not all requirements were required, or not all of the guidelines were required, so a lot of towns never adopted them. However, for future bylaw and ordinance reviews, FEMA won't accept local codes that lack specific requirements. So they are tightening up on their requirements. The 2014 map changes that went to town meeting included the Concord River watershed area for the map. These map changes are now focused on the Merrimack River watershed. So some key points on this proposal. The DCR Flood Hazard Management Program from the state is assisting cities and towns to bring those local bylaws into compliance, and they worked with us to go through our bylaw, make the recommendations to take a look at where there were gaps, where things needed to be changed. The state does have a model bylaw that they used to do that determination that does meet the minimum standard, and so that is essentially the model that we went with. Took pieces from that state model and added them into our bylaw where we needed to. Also, local bylaws are allowed to be more restrictive than that model and FEMA's requirements. Some areas of our bylaws were more restrictive. For example, there's a section that prohibits new buildings from being erected in floodplains, but the state doesn't necessarily prohibit that. So we're still allowed to have those tighter restrictions. The next diagram, or the next slide, is an eye chart. It is a pretty big map, but I did want to give you some indication of the map and the legend that is available out there. It does show the changes. It shows the differences between the new and the old. It's really difficult to see on a static slide. You'd essentially have to go on the website and play around with it in order to see anything. So that is the unfortunate piece of that. If you want any additional information and links, I have included them in the slides as well. For more information on the map itself, the floodplain changes, the bylaw changes, things like that. This is essentially a requirement that we have to go through. We don't have a lot of latitude in what we add or subtract. So we pretty much went with the DCR recommendations, and it was a unanimous approval by the board.
Okay. Any questions?
What's the practical implication of this? Right, so we update the maps on what?
So the implication of the bylaws is that it pretty much brings us into compliance. The implication of the changes to the map is that it changes the boundaries of the floodplain based on historical ecological data. I think the ecological data, if I remember Evan's statement correctly, it is somewhat lagging, the data that they use. So it's not using very current data, unfortunately, but that's the process they have for updating those. It does take a while.
And then it'll drive changes to insurance and
Yeah.
okay, all that.
Yeah.
Anything else beyond that?
Not really.
No. Okay.
And the vote on this?
Unanimous approval.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Moving right along, we have a review of the fiscal year 26 budget for the Department of Public Works and Article 11, purchase of the 10-wheel dump truck. With us this evening is Director of Public Works, Christine Clancy.
Thank you for having me tonight. So, tonight I'll be giving an overview of the DPW budget. The DPW, next slide please. The DPW is comprised of a staff of 70, various departments, and I'll go over each department tonight. The first being admin and engineering, highway division. Snow and ice is a part of the budget, it's really rolled up into highway. Public trees is a part of the budget. Waste and recycling collection. Facilities is its own division within DPW, and that includes all the public building part of the budget, the parks. Streetlight has a budget component, and then we have two enterprise accounts. Our sewer division and our stormwater division are enterprise accounts, so they're self-funded, so separately from the operating budget as the DPW and the facilities, and I'll present that as well tonight. So when we prepared the FY26 budget, we were looking at obviously level service to the best we can. Obviously, with this year's budget, there's a lot of constraints, and so we did have some losses in this year's budget. And I know it's across other departments as well. And I'll go over in each detail in the next following slides, but just to give an overview. So there's a loss of one DPW highway labor position. That is a currently vacant position, so that position as of this July will be eliminated. We also have a part-time facilities project manager helping out with many projects, and that project is also not funded beyond this fiscal year. In looking at the budget for the solid waste recycling, we were looking at making adjustments there. So one of the household hazardous waste days, we have 2 a year. We will be going down to 1 a year, and that's about a $50,000 savings. Those are the largest increases, but I will go over the budget in detail. In terms of the total DPW budget, it's just over $20 million, a 2.93% increase. I also break down by each division, so DPW, which includes solid waste recycling, $9.3 million, a 0.87 increase. Facilities is just over $2.6 million, 1.1% increase. And then our enterprise accounts, sewer enterprise, $6.4 million, a 5.6% increase. And stormwater enterprise to just over $2 million at a just over 6.5% increase. So now just diving into each one of those categories or divisions. First, with the admin and engineering, there really were minor adjustments to this year's budget. There was a 5% increase to the budget, and that is really mainly due to salary adjustments, looking at their step increases in COLA, and that really explains the overall budget increases. There were also some minor expense adjustments for computer needs. We do have two GPS units now that we use. We do a lot of our surveying in-house, and with that, we just have to have some more phones or technology to operate that equipment.
What falls under the professional services?
Professional services we use a lot for surveying, for easements. We are fortunate this year in having some of that funded also through ARPA, so we actually have a $100,000 contract to do a lot of easement work, but this $15,000, it could be wetland flagging, it could be easements, it's miscellaneous engineering services that we need. That's not really tied to a larger project. I have any questions on this slide, or I can go question at the end. Highway divisions, this is one of our larger divisions, overall just under 2.5% increase. And this is where we do have a vacancy that will be eliminated this July. In terms of the budget, some of the explanation of where that 2.5% increase, it is salary adjustments. We also increased overtime slightly, just looking at the overtime that was spent last year. We have had, now we have the Fall Festival, we have the 4th of July, there's a lot of event support. And so we did increase that budget. And some of the other, I guess it's historically looking at the overtime that we've needed to spend. We have an annual operating expense for 54 Richardson Road for the PFAS mitigation. It costs about $250,000 currently. Hopefully over time that will go down. The system's in operation, but you have to swap out the media. There's a lot of reporting requirements. This year the budget only shows $140,000 because we're fortunate again for having the ARPA funding to fund some of the balance. Next is the snow and ice. This is really level funded. And for this budget, $1.15 million. This year we're very close. I know we just recently provided a notice where we were, in February, we were very nervous where the winter was headed potentially. And that last storm especially cost us a lot of money. We are just down to the last tens of thousands of dollars, and I'm not going to say winter's over, but I think today's first day of spring. So I think we're good. We're going to spend the thing is we do like to replenish our sheds, our salt shed. So we'll probably spend that all this year. But we do typically we do. This is the budget we've been kind of level funding this going back a couple of years. This past year we did expand the brining program, and that does save us some. It is another tool in the toolbox. We use it about a few times a year. Each time we use it, we save a few $1,000s. And we also, we have our contractors to support our staff as well.
How are you doing recruiting people to do snow plowing?
So I was actually looking at the pieces of equipment, and so we had a very generous incentive this year to try to get more contractors. And we still, if you look at this year to supplement our plowing, we had 26 pieces of equipment. And so we were able to plow all of our routes. But if I went back to FY19, we had 40 pieces of equipment provided by outside contractors. So we're down 14 pieces from 6 years ago. So we always could use more. And so that's what also when we try to add on new equipment, we try, whether it be in facilities or stormwater, we try to get a vehicle with a plow, because that could also, so we're trying to bring that a little more in-house if we can.
So the plows themselves, is it a truck that you can put the plow on?
Yes, yes. So an example is in facilities last year, we had 2 vans that needed to be replaced. So we said, well, let's do a utility vehicle, and we can put a plow on it. So last year it was 2 new trucks. 1 truck last year, and then this year we have another one. So we're looking to add equipment, and then tonight I'll be presenting the stormwater dump truck, but there's an opportunity there to put a plow on it as well.
So as you get new equipment, as much as possible, if it's practical,
Yes.
become a snowplow too.
Yes, even our engineering, as we replace some of those vehicles, they're sedans, they're SUVs, but if we can put them in a truck, because they also assist us in the winter with plowing. So we do try.
Thank you.
So are you constrained on the equipment or people or both?
We are constrained on both. It depends on the scenario, but sometimes it's equipment, sometimes it's people. We could always use more equipment, I would say, because there are times where we are down. Like the thing is, if someone's that I'm not, we have some staff that are division leaders that typically don't plow, but if an emergency, we'll call them. And so if I had another piece of equipment, we could probably add another person or 2.
Got it.
Public trees, that's an account tracked separately annually. Here it's level funded. We have a lot of requests annually for trees. You know, people don't know if the trees are their trees or on the town right away or within our municipal properties. So if you look at like actual spent last year, it was actually $97,000. So originally I had asked for $100,000, but this in the final of the budget presented, it ended up being $90,000. So really it's level funded. And what we do is we just like to use those funds as best as possible. So if we have money left over, we can do more plantings. So we've been very fortunate to have an earmark this year and DCR grant funding to do new plantings. So that falls outside of this budget. But so we try to reserve this as much as possible for the emergencies and the trees we have to take down. Or in some cases, having an arborist review a tree. Or if we have a microburst like we had last year, that does impact our budget significantly sometimes. And then our solid waste and recycling. So this division is going up about just over 2.5%. We are in our third year with our E.O. Harvey 5-year contract. So each year there is an increase. Also, our disposal contract is with Covanta, and that, as far as what that increase is, that's estimated based on a quantity we're estimating, and also they go by the Boston Consumer Price Index, so we're estimating 5% increase. We do fluctuate annually with actual tonnage of solid waste or tonnage of recycling. We're right around 10,000 tons of solid waste and about 3,000 tons of recycling. Here is where we do have the reduction of the household hazardous waste day. So we'll be doing 1 as opposed to 2. There are regional events that people can participate in, so there'll be other events. So we'll make sure we'll put that on as well. But we are still having one this spring, and then we will, when we publish our annual flyer, we'll decide if it's this fall or if it's in this next spring. Municipal facilities, we have a staff of 17, so this is where we report it a little, and some of the other DPW, even though the part of DPW, it's reported as its own larger division. Overall, it's a 1.1% increase. We did, I do show a decrease in staff, just really that part-time, even though in terms of full-time equivalent, I think it's still showing FTE of 17 and a half staff members. But there's a part-time person right now that is assisting a lot of our projects. So that is ending in this June in the budget. We also have looked at overtime need similar to the highway requests that we had. We have additional event support, additional needs there. So looking at some of the actuals, we propose to increase that budget by $4,000. The cost to maintain our grounds, we do an annual contract that seems to go up every year, so we are asking for a $5,000 increase this year. There were some other contracts that we looked at based on price line items here in terms of actuals. So reduction in contract services. We have a lot of projects going on, so we're able to fund some of those projects through those projects or through ARPA. So we are asking reduction by $10,000 in that line item. Newspaper advertisement, that's because we have so many projects going out. We do track this, and that with every procurement, a lot of it has to go to Lowell Sun, so we're seeing an increase in the cost for publishing those advertisements. And then looking at the last line item is when we looked at the actuals, the vehicle maintenance, repair, and gasoline just had less usage, so we just carried that, tracking to the actuals as opposed to the projections. Public buildings, even though it does roll up into facilities, is tracked separately. Really simple budget here in that it's really just to maintain the Old North and the town offices. And so we do have a part-time attendant here that does maintain this, helps assist with this building. And then we also have Old North budget. In terms of the overall budget, though, looking at some of the actuals and the estimates, there's a decrease in the public building budget by 2.3%, and then Old North is 14%. Parks rolls up to facilities as well. The staff is captured in the facilities, so that's why what you're seeing in front of you right now is just the expense account. We do have a full-time parks person, we have a playground coordinator, and then in the summer, we hire a seasonal, 3 to 4 people seasonal. This budget is increased by 5.6%, and really, in terms of the expenses, is primarily due to the ground maintenance increase. So we share that cost between facilities and parks, and so estimating a 3,000. So overall, that contract's estimated 8,000, 5,000 in the facilities and 3,000 in the parks. Street lighting, we look at the actual spent, and then each year, so we're in at just over 10 years, the age of our street lighting. So we haven't seen a significant increase in repairs, but we're starting to see a little bit more. So just estimating a little bit more than last year, 95,000. As we start to see a more significant drop off, we will definitely have to look at more of a capital replacement, a phased capital replacement, because we could get another 5 years or 10 years out of these lights. And we do a lot of those repairs in-house.
So if the lighting bylaw were to be put into place, how would it affect this budget?
We're actually evaluating that right now. It might have an impact, but we're just I would try to have an answer for town meeting, but it might have an impact because our current lights, I've asked our town electrician to review the bylaw to see if our current lights could be repaired or amended to fit those needs. If it can't, the whole light fixture has to be swapped out. In some cases, you can make repairs, but if we're going to make a repair and have to go to the new bylaw, it might have a more significant impact. So we actually are going to run costs the next couple weeks.
Approximately how many streetlights do we have in town?
2,200.
Thank you.
Do we evaluate the streetlights, like the use increasing, decreasing, or has that just been static for years now?
I mean, it goes on at a certain time and comes off at a certain time.
The number and the location.
We typically don't like to add because unless there's a safety need. So we do add, so we're adding one right now over by Princeton Street where a new crosswalk. So there's one warranted there. We only add if it's really a safety concern. We're not really into eliminating too many lights or adding too many lights. It seems to work as is. But I would say we probably add 1 to 2 a year.
Okay.
And we replace, that's the thing is the outages, people report them, which is helpful because then we get, that gets put into our replacement plan. And then also if we see outages as well.
Okay.
So now moving on to the enterprise accounts, sewer division's own enterprise, self-funded. It's all paid through the sewer rates that everyone pays. Overall, there's a 5% increase in looking at the larger line items. Contract service line item is about $560,000. A lot, because this is self-funded, a lot of the design contracts are for sewer or inspection services are through this program. A lot of that funding has to do with force main inspections. I think it was last year, I gave a 10-year plan of our force main inspections. So annually doing force main inspections. Also right now, in terms of some of our II investigations, looking for sources of infiltration or inflow that falls under here. And then we are advancing this year the design of the 3 minor upgrade pump stations, the next in line. That's Clinton, Fair, and Evergreen. So that design we're receiving a quote right now, but probably close to $100,000 for the design. Next is the grinder pump maintenance, let's go back. Thank you. The grinder pump maintenance, we are seeing a little bit of an increase in some of the grinder pump maintenance needs or replacements. So we did increase that by $30,000 for next year. Also, with our Lowell user fee, our Lowell's rates are going up, and with their rates go up and their costs, our costs are come down to us. So we are seeing historically, going back the past 2 years, increases. Also, it's dependent on volume. We don't know what type of year we're going to have this year. This year I think we'll be tracking just on target. Our flows are lower this year than they were last year. It's dependent on wet weather. But we are just proposing a $200,000 increase. What's anticipated. And the outlay, that's really a way for, instead of a capital request through the sewer enterprise, we fund some of our vehicle replacements. This is for a 2009 Chevy Silverado that has just almost 140,000 miles on it, $95,000. This one would also, we could put a plow on it. And then the debt service increase, that's just looking at all the previous projects that we had in previous years. There's nothing else that's been added this year, but we had a 2021 Vector, Duntrail Culvert Project, 2024 a camera truck, that's sewer, a Vector truck, utility truck, and then also funding the pump station projects, the Myland, Kensington, and then the most recently, the flush truck. And then our last division, our newest division, is the stormwater division. It is enterprise. Again, those are funded through funded through the stormwater rate that everyone pays through your sewer bill. Overall, this is a 6.59% increase. In looking at a lot of the line items, that a lot of that 6.5% comes down to, because also carried in both the sewer and the stormwater expenses, is the indirect expenses. So when you start to look at the employee benefits and the total indirect costs, that went up. But we went as far as when I had first put this together, I did have, I guess, more wants in the list. It's just we can only do, we can only do so much with the enterprise fund. So contract services is level funded, but we really do have potentially a larger need there. So something that we're in time we'll have to figure out how to complete that work. Stormwater maintenance, same thing, $70,000 versus $75,000 last year. There's so many needs in our stormwater infrastructure, and that's one of the reasons why we're asking for a dump truck, is because the thought is maybe we can bring some of this work in-house. So right now, stormwater division is the smallest division. They don't have a dump truck. If they have to do a repair project and they need a dump truck, they have to borrow highways. It works, but highways also very busy. So the thought was, let's start adding some of our equipment. So last year we added the camera truck. They took over the old flush truck from the sewer division. And so we've been able, that's the thing, is we've been able to save that money in the CCTV, doing all that in-house. And now the thought is, well, maybe some of these smaller projects, we do repairs, but maybe we can do a little bit larger repairs in-house. That will help work on some of these projects.
Just to educate me a little bit here, how does it get set? So you say, hey, we need a 6.5% increase, and then what's the process to? Typically every January I set the rate for the if people's rates go up, and so this year I basically matched it at just over 6%. People's rate went up. Because of the needs we have. When I first looked at what my potential wants, needs, it was a little higher, but I was trying to also to say, what do we really need? And so it is based on a rate increase. And so I have aligned rate increases for stormwater in January and then sewer in June. But we could always, if we ever had to do other adjustments, we could. But that's what I've been targeting, is once a year. Got it.
Hopefully it's more increment. And that's the thing, is my idea is that it's more incremental, so that no one's shocked with a 10, 20, 15, because that has happened in some communities where their rates go up 15%.
Bad surprise, yeah.
They haven't increased in recent years.
And this can handle a plow, correct?
This will also have a plow, yes. So that's the thought, is it will. It won't have a sander body, because some of our dump trucks have sander bodies. But getting a plow on it will be great.
Sander bodies?
Sander. So basically, some of our dump trucks they basically deploy the salt.
Okay.
So they have a different body on it.
Okay.
Or interchangeable body, and that costs extra to get. So this will be a dump truck with a plow on it in the winter. And
Exclusively used by the stormwater division?
yes, yeah. One thing I don't like to mix sewer and stormwater for good reasons. And so,
I'm asking.
so this will be stormwater, but highway and stormwater sometimes share. So if it ever was a real need, and we have done it, whereas if something was down, theoretically, I guess we could share equipment. But this this is intended just for stormwater. And I think the need's there, because we're, like I said, we're gonna try to do some larger projects, medium size.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, before you launch, I'm sorry,
Mike.
before you launch into the next item, I have a budget question that I'd like to ask, I guess, the town manager, or I don't know how to fit that into this schedule.
Well, that would be discussion of budget hearing and springtime meeting warrant article schedule.
Okay, whenever you deem it.
That's next, so hop on in.
Just a quick, my quick question is, how is the building department funded? I mean, we have a building department, and I don't see a budget coming before the finance committee, so how is it funded?
So I think that was just presented in the DPW budget.
I didn't see.
Building inspection.
I did
okay.
not.
Were you talking the building department?
Building department.
Building
Oh, downstairs, okay,
So,
okay.
yeah, that comes under the public safety portion of the budget. So if you were to look through a previous town budget, you have police and fire are the larger departments, but it's considered public safety because of, if buildings aren't built to the right code, it could be a public safety problem and things of that nature. So it would, to answer your question briefly, I would say it's funded through tax revenues like all of the other, it's part of the general fund operating budget of the town. I think traditionally they haven't come before the finance committee, some of the smaller departments, but
So they're worked into the fire department and the police department.
they are a separate,
a line
accounting,
item
they're a
in the-
line item, they have their own department code and the accounting system and all that, but in the general category, the budget will be under public safety.
For existing plumbing, where would that be?
That would all be, yeah, under inspectional services, it would be, and it encompasses, the building inspections, wiring, plumbing, electrical inspecting. All of those things are under the building department, and Jose is the department head.
It's in that thick budget, comprehensive budget that I submitted to you, several weeks ago.
We haven't had that particular department come before us in the time that I've been on
Nor I.
the finance committee.
It's essentially a level staffing budget for the year, in terms of we're maintaining, a full-time building commissioner, the two local inspectors, again, as John noted, the plumbing inspector, electrical inspector, and I think the only modification in there is now that we're doing seal and weights and measures on the shared approach, that falls under that category as well. But it's basically, what you've seen tonight in the other budgets, it's level staffing. The only changes are the COLAs for the people's compensation, and then minor expenses. But what you don't want to ask is how do they compare versus what they take in for revenue, because they certainly take in more revenue than they expend, because for what they.
I knew that.
Yeah, but yes, but that's how it's staffed. It's staffed under the budget line of public safety. So you have the municipal administration, then you have public safety, education, human services and so forth, but it's under the public safety category.
The only question I would ask on the revenue side is, do we think we're getting the permits that we should be getting in this town?
Now, that's a different question, because it's
Well, it's what set me off
no,
looking at
because-
this.
Because that's almost suggesting is the work being performed without permits.
That is
And that
correct.
occurs, but that's not a budgetary issue. It's not for lack of resources. It's that unfortunately we find that people undertake building activities without a permit. Most recently happened this week. If you've been on Tingsboro Road and they had that big brick wall that says Williamsburg 1 and 2, well, somebody thought it'd be a good idea to demo that without getting a building permit. And so they were immediately issued a cease and desist order. And then when you fail to obtain a permit for permitted work, whether it's in Chelmsford or other towns, you end up paying multiples of the fee for that violation. Because you're right, otherwise there's no incentive to get a fee if you just get, we'll just pay it if you catch me. So that's the funding mechanism. So yes, we do encounter work performed without permits, it often becomes a real issue for somebody if they go to sell their home, because somebody will pull the field cards and the records, and they'll say, well, wait a minute, that's not what's shown here. We're also starting to see it, believe it or not, with the initial forays into the ADUs, people want to convert their structures, and they're like, wait a minute, when was this work performed? And the risk you run is, if you want the code inspectors to sign off, they've got to see the rough work.
Yep.
And so you run the risk that you're going to have to be tearing out sheetrock and other work in order for them to inspect, because it's a code and life safety issue. So yes, that issue is everywhere, meaning it's Chelmsford and other communities. That's the risk they run by not adhering under the provisions of their license, of people who have licenses to do this work, if they're tradespeople, or if the homeowner sort of does it by going to Home Depot and doing their own work without permits. So that's how it's enforced. Is we get tips. We come across while we're out there saying, I didn't remember there being a permit built for that porch or that roof or what have you. The roofs ones are hard now. The old days, they would do a roof, it would take several days, and then you go by and you see that work. Now when they institute somebody who does a roof in one day, because that's the method, that's harder to catch. So it does happen, but we like other communities, do the best you can.
A lot of times the assessors will pick it up in a measure and list.
I know a lot more about
Yeah.
this than you think.
All
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Thank you. Continue with discussion of the budget hearing and Springtown meeting we're not going to schedule.
Good job.
Let's bring it up our schedule here.
It's not even 8:30.
Don't jinx us.
Yeah, I know.
I heard what he just said. Don't jinx us.
Come on. Okay, so,
Can you make that a little bigger?
a little bigger. Let me see what I can do here.
There we go.
Tell me when.
Keep going. There we go.
Okay. All right, so we've had the highlight in yellow this evening. Next week, we have scheduled the Chelmsford Public Schools. We also have the police department. And then I've spoken with Mary Donovan, and she'll be in as well next week to present. And I think that will bring us to the end of our presentations. Hold me. I zoomed in, I can't. Yeah. With the school presentation, I'll just ask Dr. Lane to give a brief discussion about his transportation of children eligible Title IV-E foster care update in that article. And then, as I said, Mary Donovan will be giving a presentation on Happy Tales Pet Cemetery, her article, as well. And so that will bring us, what I will add is, for town council, on the question we had earlier regarding the CPC, we can have town council attend through Zoom, or we can ask just for an email or a letter we can read into the record, whichever anyone wants to do. I don't know if we want to ask questions or if we're just asking for a confirmation. Just trying to budget the time wisely here.
Maybe through Zoom.
Zoom, yeah.
Zoom?
Yeah.
That's fine, he doesn't
Okay.
need to.
Sure.
You don't know the question, like Anita might.
There may
ask a
be another question. Yeah, I
She
understand.
has a question, then I have a question on her question, and
Sure. Okay. So we'll add that to the schedule as well. So we'll have 3 presentations and just a quick discussion on that question for CPC. And then we'll go straight in next week to our voting on recommendations. There are 32 articles to go through, but a lot of them are very quick. I imagine there'll be some.
Percentage on them?
We've never done that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question, Elaine.
That's what I'm here for.
I'd rather not,
Okay.
just because we're adding recommendations as well. And so sometimes you get one where someone wants to abstain, or you get a section where you have a question on it. So just to make sure we're thorough in our reporting and putting information into the letter in the book, I want to make sure that we go article by article. And again, a lot of them go quickly, so it's not a lot of time spent on them. But I just want to avoid missing one where we have maybe some discussion or a dissenting or abstention. So that will take us to that, and then over the next week and a half or so, after our recommendations, we'll put together the book and our letter, as we'll discuss again after our votes yet next week. What I ask every session for every town meeting is that if we do have dissenting opinions on the vote, that you simply send what you'd like to include in that letter to me, so we can include the reasoning behind
Okay,
why
so
that vote was
say if I
made.
dissent on something,
Yeah.
then I should say, I dissent on this because I think it's not
Well,
blah, blah,
you wouldn't,
blah,
it's a
blah,
spec-
blah, blah,
well, yeah,
blah.
you wouldn't specifically say dissent, but the reason you voted the other way.
Yeah.
And so I worked that into the letter so that we can report to the town meeting why the board voted a different way. Just so that all discussion is there, and there's a brief synopsis of why we voted the way we voted. And I found over the last decade that when that's there, there's a lot less polling involved of our committee to ask why we voted a certain way, because ostensibly they should see why we voted a certain way. They can ask questions further if they'd like to, of course. But I've found that there are a lot less questions, a lot less polling than we used to have in the past.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on the schedule and the voting? Okay, no. Next part of the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment this evening? Seeing none. There is public here,
I know.
although they all presented, so. There's no one in the Zoom room for public comment either. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See everybody next week.
That was quick.